I am Phil Alcock, and I am an anarchist. We are taught as children not to hit or push others, or take things away from others. Even if we aren't taught that, people figure it out anyway, because cooperation, and not coercion, is the most efficient path to satisfying our needs and wants. You own yourself, no one else does, and no one has the right to infringe upon your liberty. But as adults, we find out that if they're wearing a badge or hold an office, they're suddenly exempt from those rules. Most people, when shown a video of a group of people violently beating a person who's lying on the ground, will agree that the group is doing wrong. But put uniforms and badges on the group and their opinion suddenly changes, that the victim must have done something wrong and deserved it. No private individual could get away with doing what the state does, so why is the state allowed to do the same acts with impunity? People hold the act of voting to be one of our most sacred rights as citizens. What they don't realize is that it really boils down to a popularity contest, and if one side wins, they get to enforce their views on others at gunpoint and call it law. Ultimately, the act of voting is an attempt to turn one's opinion into a death threat. Laws and morals are not the same thing, and rarely are. We know this because all the atrocities committed by governments throughout history were legal. When the law and your own conscience conflict, you have two choices. You can obey the law and suffer acting against your own moral compass, or you can act morally and risk being arrested and caged by the state. Objectors to voluntarism give arguments that if you don't like it the way it is, then why don't you vote or write your representative, etc. We've been voting and writing and calling and protesting for over 200 years, and things only get perpetually worse. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is the very definition of insanity. Government can never work for a multitude of reasons, one of which is that we are all individuals with different wants and needs, preferences, and abilities. There can never be a state that is one size fits all. That's where the market can provide solutions. In a free market, everyone can choose what they want from innumerable providers. This means that everyone will have the ability to satisfy their own wants and needs, and not have to suffer too much of one thing and not enough of another, as is the case when services are monopolized by the state. And speaking of monopolies, the state may be seen as many things, but one thing that it is at its core is a monopoly on violence and coercion. The state claims the right to collect taxes, yet you aren't allowed to collect taxes from your neighbor. The state can put you in a cage if you do something it disagrees with, regardless if it's something you do in your own home or if there's no victim, but you can't do the same to your neighbor if he does something you disapprove of. So where does the state get this power? It is argued that without the state, we would descend into chaos and destruction on account of humans being naturally greedy and violent. Look around you. If that was the case, then no police force or military would ever be able to quell everyone. Indeed, we wouldn't have achieved the civilization we have now. Not because of governments, but because humans are naturally cooperative. Cooperation has higher rewards than crime, and thus throughout history, the greatest achievements have resulted from innovation, not legislation. Governments start wars, oppression, and condone slavery. An individual can never hope to achieve much more than petty thuggery. It is only by the fact that the people see those in uniform and office as legitimate and having rights above everyone else. Centuries of careful indoctrination from birth have trained people that the state has a divine right to rule over others. People forget that those who rule them are no different from them. Dictators, emperors, kings, senators, and presidents are born, grow up, age, and die, just as everyone else. There is nothing divinely or physiologically different about them that elevates them above the rest of humanity, that is, except the idea that they can. You don't have the right to steal, enslave, or murder, then how is it that you can ask someone else to commit these crimes on your behalf suddenly makes it right or even justified? This is exactly how governments operate, but people accept this as okay or worse, a necessary evil. Necessary to what end? Peace? What government in the history of the world has ever brought lasting peace? Governments don't even exist. You can't point to a government or take a photo of it. Of course, the guns are real, the bombs are real, and the threats are real, but they are all meaningless if people didn't imagine they had the right to rule others. They would be exposed for exactly what they were. Gangs, trying to take over you and rule you and steal your stuff. Humanity has been trying for 5,000 years to create peace through statism, and no matter how relatively free and light-handed they start, they always lead to the inevitable end of war, death, destruction, and finally collapse. The problem isn't having the right government or the right people in charge. The problem is the existence of the state itself. The state only exists in your mind. Learn to think for yourself so you can be what you truly are, a human being living with freedom and dignity. I am Phil Alcock of Jefferson Anarchy Hour on the Voluntary Virtues Network.